Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats Weekly Podcast Episode number 14. I'm your host, Dan Matson, and this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, and tradition of wooden boats. We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. Not bad for wooden boat enthusiasts. Merry Christmas, folks. It is December 22nd. Christmas is a few days away, and New Year. Oh, I hope you're having a great holiday season. We're back for another episode of Hooked on Wooden Boats today, number 14. Been doing this for 3.5 months now and having a blast with it as usual. It really doesn't seem like work doing this. It's so much fun to go out and interview people and find out about their story and look at wooden boats. And wow, I mean, it's really, even the putting together the episodes and doing the technical part of it is kind of fun too. So I think that's a good thing. Today's featured segment, I have an interview with Jake Beattie. Jake is a director of the Northwest Maritime Center in Port Townsend, Washington. He's got a great story to tell. It's about 31 minutes long, so hang around for a few minutes for the interview. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Next week, I have an interview with Dee and Sarah Meek. Dee and Sarah have a really fascinating story. They're all fascinating stories, you know. I keep saying everything's fascinating, but it really is. Very interesting. They bought a tugboat a few years ago, actually 20 years ago, I think. That was built in 1890, a wooden tugboat, and they refurbished it and have sailed it around, motored it around, I guess you would say, technically, have lived aboard and have a history of the boat. And it's a really cool story, so I would encourage you to come back next week for that. Just a reminder, this is a weekly show published on Thursday by the end of the day each week. It's typically between 30 and 60 minutes in length. I've had mostly interviews on my shows, but there's some other topics I talk about also. But I'm just here to have some fun, and I'm getting new subscribers and listeners and website folks each week, so that's pretty cool. The numbers are growing, so it's great to have you out there listening to this. I'd love to connect with you. You can do so, connect with me on my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com. And one of the ways you can connect is by going to my homepage, and on the upper right-hand corner, you can subscribe to my email list. And then I send out, once or twice a month, I send out an email with some special resources, articles, videos, fun information. It's a way to connect directly with my audience, and also I like to get information from folks about boats that they've built, boats that they own, and that sort of thing. So I've had some people sending in pictures and email descriptions, and that's been really fun. So I'd encourage you to subscribe to my email list. No solicitation going on there, and you can unsubscribe at any time. It's not a big deal. You can also connect with me on my website by leaving comments. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. If you go to iTunes to podcasts, look up Hooked on Wooden Boats, you can subscribe there. You can email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. And I'm on Twitter at twitter.com/woodenboatdan and in facebook.com/woodenboatdan. So please connect with me. The other thing you can do is call my voicemail feedback hotline, with any questions or comments. 424-261-2360. 424-261-2360. It's a lot of fun to connect that way, so please do so. Well, I've decided what my next project is going to be. I've ordered the book called The Canoe Shop, which has plans for building a sassafras canoe. There's 3 versions, a 12-foot, 14-foot, and a 16-foot boat. And they're lap-straight canoes. I'm probably going to build either the 12 or the 14-footer. I'm kind of leaning towards the 12 because I want it to be under 30 pounds. And I think the 14-footer would probably weigh closer to 40 to 45 pounds. But the 12-footer is under 30 pounds, so it'll be a real easy boat to cart around. So I'm pretty excited to get that book. Hopefully I'll get it this week and can get started on the boat in the next couple of weeks, which means I get to go out and order supplies, plywood, marine plywood, and epoxy and all that fun stuff. It's been a few years since I've built anything, so I'm pretty pumped up about it. Also, I started reading Larry Cheek's book, The Year of the Boat. If you recall, last week I did an interview with Larry for the podcast. Larry is an author and a journalist and started building wooden boats a few years ago, and he wrote a book about one of those builds. It's a very interesting book, very insightful. He's very transparent in the book about his own journey in life, so it's pretty cool. So I would encourage you to pick that up if you'd like to. And by the way, you can get that through my website. If you go to the resources page, you can click on the book there. It takes you to Amazon, and you can purchase it. And if you do make a purchase on Amazon of that book, or actually anything on Amazon, once you click through my resources page, I get paid a 4% commission. So it's a small amount, but every little bit helps. And if you want to help support me, that'd be a great way to do it. I think that's it for the introduction, folks. Next, we have the interview with Jake Beattie. Thanks for your time, Jake, in spending me when I came to Port Townsend a couple of weeks ago. And let's go ahead and roll the interview. Hope you enjoy it. It is December 8th, and I'm at the Northwest Maritime Center sitting here with Jake Beattie. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to be here. So you're the executive director here at the Northwest Maritime Center.
That's right.
And when did you start, Jake?
Started the first of the year 2011.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thanks.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into boating and wooden boats, and just give me a little personal history.
Well, I grew up sailing. I think I took my first command of an El Toro at age 7, and then spent summers and vacations sailing with my family in the San Juan Islands on our small sailboat, and then went to college and decided rather than using my degree, I would rather spend time at sea. So I took a vacation and went on board a tall ship as a sailor, and then it's a tall ship Bounty, sailed up and down the East Coast, and left there. I told them I could give them 2 weeks as a volunteer, and I left about a year and a half later as the first mate, and then quickly signed on board another tall ship, the 3-masted schooner, the Dennis Sullivan, that we completed in Milwaukee, and then sailed out the St. Lawrence Seaway and then down to Tampa Bay, where we wintered and sailed all winter. Then worked for Outward Bound as a seamanship instructor on both coasts for about 3 years. Did some commercial work as a mate on board freighters and worked a little bit on some tugboats too before jumping into the nonprofit world and really trying to cement that powerful experience that I was able to provide to people through sail training, but more in a community setting. So I spent about 6 years at the Center for Wooden Boats in Seattle, another year at a bicycle nonprofit, and then moved back into the world of nonprofits for boats when moving here about a year ago.
So I'm a cyclist, so you got me curious, because I did see that you spent a year at a nonprofit cycling. What organization was that?
Bikeworks.
Bikeworks. So what do they do?
Well, they harness the tool of bicycles for experiential education, much like we harness the tool of boats for experiential education. Yeah. So I'm a firm believer that if people can gain competency in real world, physical world skills, that impacts the rest of their lives in profound ways.
Yeah.
And I think there's no better vehicle for more powerful experiences than a boat. but certainly bicycles are sometimes more accessible, especially if you don't live in a waterfront community.
Yeah, right. I heard of some organization a while back that's teaching people in Africa, I believe.
Bamboo bikes.
Yeah, how to make bamboo bikes.
Pretty amazing.
It's like, how cool is that?
It's really neat.
Yeah.
And they're exporting them back to the United States for a lot of money.
Yeah, right. And then I didn't see them this year, but at the Wood and Boat Festival here in the past, I've seen a company that makes bikes with wooden frames.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are they still around?
As far as I know.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Beautiful bikes.
Yeah.
Hollow frames and...
I wouldn't want to ride them anywhere though.
Yeah, I know.
Worried about scraping them up.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit on your personal history. So tell me more about the tall ship thing, what that was like, and why you spent so much time doing that. What was a big draw there, Jake?
Well, adventure, certainly. I mean,
Yeah.
at the time I was 21 or 22, and I was looking for a cathartic experience at sea. And so I went to really experience something different. And some of the experiences were fun. It was certainly great showing up in Maritime Festival after Maritime Festival. That's basically what we would do on the Bounty. We would go from harbor days in New Haven, Connecticut to seafaring days down the Long Island coast, or we'd kind of do the festivals up and down, which is a lot of fun. You see a lot of neat boats, and there's really a great collegial community of tall ship sailors, traditional sailors. And I learned a lot of great skills: how to splice wire, how to go aloft and work with a team of people at 60 feet to furl a 800-pound sail. I mean, it's incredible.
Wow.
And a great adventure. I also had some of the hardest times of my life, where not only are you teaching juvenile offenders how to furl a sail on one sail, but there's some of the adventures at sea aren't safe and they're not planned. And through my experiences on tall ships, I had some of what I like to call crucible moments, where if you're up to your elbows in bilge water, you're up to your armpits in bilge water, and you're 200 miles off the coast of Cape Hatteras, and Maydays are going out, and your job is to rebuild the pumps to buy time for the Coast Guard. These are the moments when you grow as a person, and these are the moments that through more controlled environments, through programs where you can manage that level of stress and that level of adventure. Those are the kind of experience, those crucible moments that I think everyone in the world ought to have. And that's why I'm still doing this, is that the maritime environment really provides immersive learning environments that are more powerful than any others that are out there. So through that initial foray into the tall ships, I kind of stumbled into an educational model that I wasn't really aware of before. A way to create personal growth in people that I think is profound.
Wow, so you're we got to back up here to that. Talking about being up to your armpits in bilge water.
Sure. Waiting
for the Coast Guard to come. I mean, that sounds pretty serious.
It was.
Tell me about that.
I've never considered. You always hear about bad times at sea, but when you're in an engine room 2 decks down, and you're working to make sure the engines are alive, and you're trying to make all the pumps work, and you're routing. I was routing the heads so that they were sucking water out of the out of the bilge, and the main engines were sucking water out of the bilge. And I never really thought that you can get like 1.5 seas in an engine room. If there's seas outside and there's water in the engine room, you get seas in the engine room too. So it was completely mind blowing. Yeah. It wasn't fun at the time. I mean, we were up for a long time.
So the bilge water was coming over the deck into the...
No, it was leaks in the hull. We developed some leaks in the hull in that transit south.
Because of a storm or what? Or just because of...
Because that's what happened, yeah.
Wow.
Not an experience I'd wish on anyone, to be in a sinking boat.
Was there a chance you were going to have to scuttle the ship?
I mean, we were certainly considering those options. Luckily, there was rescue personnel nearby, and they came with pumps, and we got into harbor safely.
Wow! So it wasn't really a storm that caused all that. It was just a leaky ship. And
yeah, that's right.
Out to sea, and what do you do?
Something opened up. Yeah.
You have lifeboats on board, obviously.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's at those moments, I would think, is when a group of people really come together and you create an experience that bonds you for a lifetime.
For sure. And like I said, that type of experience are powerful. I would not wish anyone to be on a sinking ship with actual risk of life peril.
Yeah.
We were lucky, and there are other certain maritime calamities that people are less lucky. I do think that type of experience, that sort of, the founder of Outward Bound had a great saying that he was trying to find the moral equivalent of war, that wartime or that sort of level of stress and immersion really creates powerful experiences for people, but it's immoral. And if we could create that same level of impactful experience, but in a peaceful way, then people can grow from that.
Yeah. Wow. So that was a big growing experience for you.
For sure. Yeah.
As a person. And how about the juveniles and other people?
Luckily, all these students were off. It wasn't a program. It was just that we were in transit. So
I see.
All the students were off at that point.
Yeah. So how many sails are on a ship like that?
Well, it kind of depends on a tall ship. A schooner can have 5 to 7.
Yeah.
A square rigger, like the tall ship Bounty, had I think 26 or 27 sails. When you get the 3 masts with 4 sails on them, and all the staysails and the headsails and topsails, you can get quite a fair number of sails.
Wow. So were you guys sailing most of the time in that boat? Or you did some motoring, just mainly in and out of moorage? Or?
The unfortunate thing about a lot of tall ship sailing is that you're in an 18th century technology, but you're on a 21st century schedule. So if you're trying to make dates and you're trying to make deadlines, you can sail as much as you can, but the reality is oftentimes you're going to have to motor to get one place or another.
Yeah. What kind of speed do you cruise on those things if you got the motor fired up?
It kind of depends on the boat. Yeah, but it's that 6 to 10 sort of, depending on the boat. Yeah.
Cool. So then you mentioned freighters and tugboats.
Yeah.
You spent some time doing it. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, when you work for Outward Bound or any of these sail training organizations, often you can work there for as long as you can afford to. And so with student loan deferments running out, I ended up going into the commercial fleet and using my license and certificates for commercial work instead of just the educational work. So for a brief stint, I was involved with a towboat operation that would take petroleum products between Philadelphia and Norfolk, Virginia. And then probably one of my favorite jobs in the commercial fleet I was the mate on board of a small coastal freighter, about a 200-foot boat that would take palletized cargo to small fishing villages in Alaska that didn't have container facilities. Then we'd take back all the fish. So I like the company's defunct now. It's called Western Pioneer, and I like to say we supply the fishing villages with everything you need to be a fisherman, which is like groceries and bait and cigarettes and alcohol, and then we bring back all their fish.
You leave the unhealthy stuff and bring the good stuff back here to the mainland.
That's right. Yeah.
So do you have your captain's license?
I used to.
Okay.
I used to.
At that time you did.
I let it lapse because at some point I really moved ashore, and the last thing I wanted would be what they call a paper ticket, which is someone who has a license but really doesn't use it. And I'm in a phase of my life where really right now I'm trying to cement the maritime experience on shore, and I'm not out there earning my living on the water. So it felt a little phony to keep it up.
Yeah. So how many years total were you involved in that type of activity where you were on the water a lot?
I probably say 9 or 10, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay. So then you ended up at the Center for Wooden Boats.
That's right.
After that.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you do there exactly? I saw your title as Deputy Director, and I never know what that means.
Yeah, that's right. I started as the program director. I was coming out of Outward Bound and all the sail training I was doing, and my job was to take that same powerful experience that happens often over the horizon and then bring it back and really root it in a community model. So we started some sailing programs. We started some experiential education programs in partnership with some local school districts. We do some urban-based voyaging. So taking the 26-foot rowing and sailing longboats that we were using in Outward Bound and bringing those into a less expeditionary model, but into a more cyclical model. So every week we take out folks and do skill building, and then kind of have people explore their own urban waterways. Mm-hmm. And then ended up as a lot of nonprofits, you the nonprofit promotion is same pay, new title, and so I would, as we continued to grow, and the Center for Wooden Boats was in a period of growth period, so I was interested in some of the more managerial things. So, deputy director, you asked what it really does. At the time, I would tell people it's everything else, where the executive director tends to do everything, and the deputy director tends to do everything else.
I see. Yeah,
so,
right.
Kind of depending on the week, I was pitching in and helping out, line out our budget, or moving a project forward to get a new campus at the north end of the lake, or pitching out and helping teach sailing that day because one of the volunteers didn't show up. So it was kind of et cetera.
Yeah. So you were telling me earlier before we started the interview about your living experience down there. Tell our audience about that. Your living.
This is one of those living scenarios you can't plan for, and it's almost ridiculous to say out loud. So, Center for Wooden Boats exists out of a floating series of docks and houseboats at the south end of Lake Union, an urban lake in the middle of Seattle, about 1.5 miles long. The other end of the lake is a park called Gasworks Park, which is an really neat old industrial park that people have preserved some of the industrial architecture. And there's a lot of grass. Next to the Gasworks Park is a little marina called Gasworks Park Marina, where a small liveaboard community exists. And so my wife and I were living at that marina and working at the Center for Wooden Boats 1.5 miles across water. And Center for Wooden Boats is a place where it has a lot of rowboats and sailboats. And since my job was to manage those rowboats and sailboats, I'd often row to work. Or sail to work. Or at the time I had a little tugboat and I could take that back and forth to work. So it was my commute was ridiculously pretty.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
My wife and I just did a hike over Saturday over Evie Landing on the Island.
Sure.
And I was reading about was it Captain Eby or whoever the guy was, and he had a big rowboat, some kind of a dory or whatever, and he would row from Whidbey Island to Port Townsend and commute across the sound 10 miles with this rowboat.
A little bit more adventurous than Lake Union.
That's cool. That's cool. So now you're at the Northwest Maritime Center. So for our listeners, tell us a little bit about that, what this organization does and the mission and what you're doing here.
The Northwest Maritime Center is really the home for a lot of different maritime activities. We are the home of the Wooden Boat Foundation, which for 35 years has been really the heart of traditional boat building and celebrating traditional craft here in Port Townsend. We probably have the premier wooden boat festival that we've been doing for 35 years, premier on the West Coast, where over 300 boats from all over show up. About 30,000 people a year show up to celebrate wooden boats and to look at the latest restoration or the boats that are back in the area. We also give boat building classes and mentor young people through wooden boat building. The Northwest Maritime Center is also home of the Wooden Boat Chandlery, which is a great place to find hard-to-find tools, hard-to-find hardware. We partner with some of our local producers, Carol Hasse Sales, Port Townsend Foundry, to get some of those harder-to-find products, oakum, caulking mallets, that kind of stuff. Get that into the world for the people who are still trying to maintain their wooden boats, whether for recreational or commercial purposes. We are also the home of a lot of maritime conferences and symposium. We exist in a new building. This building was built in 2009.
Yeah, this is gorgeous.
Thank you.
This is unbelievable, this facility. I love it.
It's my favorite to... It's something, since I started a year ago and the building was completed a year and a half ago, I get to take a lot of credit for something I had nothing to do with. Mm-hmm. A lot of people had worked really hard to secure this property it was going to be a hotel.
Really?
And the community got together, purchased the land, and then raised money over 10 years to create what's now a 24,000 square foot facility with a maritime library that's in partnership with our community library system and community meeting spaces. We partner a lot with our for education of our school district. Every single seventh grader, pretty much every seventh grader in Jefferson County goes through what we call the Maritime Discovery Program, where, for instance, a middle school in town takes over our facility for a week and it becomes their campus. The school bus drops them off here. Their teachers teach everything through the maritime lens, where my favorite part in that is their math class. They will develop navigation plans on charts. So you're using charts, learning navigation skills, but also using math skills. The next day, they'll go out in their PE class in our longboats, which are these 26-foot rowing boats, learn how to row for PE, but then they'll navigate their math class, the navigation plan they made in nav class the day before, and then they'll come back in and they'll write about it for English class. So it's just really, we found a way to really integrate the maritime experience for these people in waterfront communities to really enhance their own learning and their sense of place.
I wish they'd had that when I was in 7th grade.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty neat. It's a neat program.
That is awesome.
The other end of the spectrum, right now we're developing, this is kind of hot off the presses, you're going to get this even before 3 Sheets Northwest.
Oh, okay.
We've just finalized the plans for a high-tech maritime learning center that is, if the Wooden Boat Foundation part of who we are is around celebrating the traditional, celebrating the history, the Pilot House Learning Center is going to be a state-of-the-art digital learning environment that'll have immersive simulation ship skills training where you can show up and have an accurate replication of what it's like to be a tug towing a barge or a tug towing an ocean liner. You could be in a tugboat working as a student next door in another workstation to someone who's on the tanker that you're towing. So we're partnering with Pacific Maritime Institute in Seattle, and we're using a lot of their same software. So this will be a learning environment to help both professional mariners hone and gain skills and their certifications, and also looking at it for applying that same technology for the recreational boater who's looking to get a little bit more serious about their own learning. One of the things that we're pursuing for next year is an additional maritime symposium. Last year we started our first spring symposium.
I saw that, yeah.
It was great. It was a weekend of learning for about 150 people.
Yeah.
Show up for the weekend and get to really connect with some of the experts and the rock stars of the maritime world. Obviously there's our local rock stars like Brian Toss and Carol Hasse, who are riggers and sailmakers extraordinaire. But we had Lynn and Larry Pardee, who are here for the keynotes about adventure. We had systems experts from around the world like Steve D'Antonio, who's kind of he's a systems guy, and people flock from everywhere to hear him speak and hear his opinions. This year, we're doing another one for the third weekend in March, and Steve Callahan, who wrote Adrift, who has spent 72 days or something like that in a life raft.
Oh, right.
He'll be talking about what he learned through that experience about safety at sea.
Was that over by Hawaii?
I couldn't tell you where it was.
Okay.
We're also developing through this Pilot House Learning Center for the fall of 2012, Inside Passage workshops. For everyone who's been thinking about doing the Inside Passage, this will be how to prepare yourself for it, and then using the simulation technology, we can actually transport you to some of the trickier areas, and you can virtually navigate Wrangell Narrows, or you can virtually navigate to some of these passages before you ever go up there to kind of train for that.
So for our listeners that aren't from this area, tell them about the Inside Passage, what that is.
Sure. Inside Passage refers to a set of fairly protected waterways that you can safely, more or less, from all the way from Olympia, Washington, all the way up to Juneau, Alaska, with a few openings, can in a recreational sized boat really do some serious cruising without. And always be within sight of the side of land. It's a gorgeous trip for anyone who's never done it. There's bears, wildlife, whales, eagles, neat little anchorages, neat little towns. Yeah. And from where we sit right now in Port Townsend to Ketchikan, it's around 750 miles or so.
Wow.
I think that's about right.
So you start in Washington, you go through Canada.
To
Alaska.
Back to Alaska, and then Alaska is a cruising grounds that's, it's unless you're in a cruise ship, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a cruise ship. Apparently I don't want to take a cruise there. I'd rather be there in a small boat.
So the Pilot House is going to have essentially simulators.
Yeah, I think I have a picture somewhere.
Is that what it is?
Simulators, and there'll be simulators that you can either. There's sort of two modes for the Pilot House. The first mode is one where you can come up and be a participant in what is an approximation of a ship's bridge. So we'll have navigation equipment that'll be live. It'll be reflecting the actual maritime traffic that's going through Admiralty Inlet, which is the entrance to Puget Sound. And every year there's somewhere over 9,000 commercial vessels that transit that. You can look out the window and see them, and this navigational equipment will allow you to monitor their radio traffic. Here you can hear the pilots talking, and it also will allow you to sort of see what a radar looks like, and have you be able to integrate with the AIS equipment. So you'll see what the name of what the name of the vessel is, how fast they're going, that kind of stuff. Then there's the same space will turn into this simulation environment where 3 55-inch screens will drop down from the ceiling. Blackout curtains will go over and cover up the beautiful view, and it'll turn that same viewing tower into an immersive ship skills simulator.
Wow. For
both professional and recreational training, for exciting young minds to the possibilities of a life at sea.
Yeah. Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be really neat.
Cool, and that's going to be done by June?
That's right, by June.
Yeah. So that'll be up and running for the next Wooden Boat Festival in September.
Knock wood, yeah.
Knock on wood for the Wooden Boat Festival. Anyway, okay. So a couple more questions here, Jake. What is it you like most about this job? I mean, this job sounds pretty cool. I'm sure there's stresses and good things and bad things, but what do you like most about it? What drives you to come down here every day and do this?
It goes back to the source of my passion is really that I think the sea is the most amazing teacher that exists. Mm-hmm. And the fun part about my job is that while I don't get to go out on the boats every day, I really get to help make possible connecting more and more people to that medium and to those experiences. So even though a lot of my job is sitting behind a desk and making sure the budget balances, or talking to podcasters like yourself, behind it all is this desire for people to be stronger people to be more confident, to be more competent, to be more resilient, to be more curious, to think of themselves as people capable of embracing the unknown and not being scared because they just haven't done it before. Mm-hmm. I think that's the true value of going through those crucible moments, whether you're on a sinking ship or whether you're in a storm or whether you're just out rowing from EB Landing to Port Townsend. I think the more people can get out and do things in the physical world, the more times people can find competency and really discover their own capability, the more resilient they become for not just experiences on the water, but experiences the rest of their lives. That's really what I'm about. And I think this place and our programs and the impact we have on the world, I think that's what we're really looking to do. And that's what makes me get out of bed in the morning.
Cool. That's awesome. So I had another question for you here, Jake. Out of all the boats, small boats now, wooden boats that you've sailed and rowed and used over the years, are there one or two that really stick out as your favorite?
Yeah.
You wish you had today?
How much time do we have? So, I said all that stuff, and it's true, but I care about like the impact boats have on people. I also just think boats are cool.
Yeah.
So I think I've sailed on a handful of perfect boats. And
so tell me about one or two of those.
A couple of the perfect boats. The first one that comes to mind is the R-Boat Pirate. It's a R-Boat 1928, designed by Seattle's own Ted Geary. And an R-Boat is a class of sailing boats that with really long overhangs and really efficient sailors. And this boat in particular was campaigned extensively on both coasts through some regattas and was restored over a period of about 8 years after finding by a group of volunteers who found it near to the dumpster.
Wow.
Scott Rohr out of Seattle was one of the lead volunteers on that, and I got to sail on it a couple times while I was at the Center for Wooden Boats, and it is the most sublime experience where the boat balances perfectly. The boat makes this incredibly graceful wake through the water. And really, when I think about what's a perfect boat is when it does exactly what it was designed for. And nothing in the design nor the construction takes away from that user experience. And so for a boat to create an efficient hull form, heeled over so those long overhangs are in the water, extending the water line, beating the rule and making a faster boat. It's amazing. It's a graceful boat, and it's pretty to look at too.
What length is that boat?
I think the waterline length is around 25.
Yeah.
But length overall is something like 42. I mean,
Really?
those overhangs are huge.
Yeah.
Could
Now,
be
what
40.
you overhang, you mean like a bowsprit? Or what?
No, so in a hull form that has a lot of overhang, it's kind of where the boat at the water then has bow and stern that aren't in the water, but come out of the water at a very gradual angle.
I see.
And the design feature of that is not only does it look really graceful, but when the boat heels over, more of that hull is exposed to the water, which increases the water line, which increases the theoretical hull speed, which for the R boat, that was how people try to make faster boats given a certain rule measurement parameter. Fantastic. And Ted Geary's boats, he's a famous Seattle-based designer of that sort of golden age of yachts and here in the Pacific Northwest. Perfect boat, the Pirate, R11 out of Seattle.
Wow. Is the boat still down there?
Still down there, yeah.
Still at the Center for Wooden Boats?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, cool.
On the other end of the spectrum, the best wooden cruising boat I was ever on is currently down in Mexico, built here in Port Townsend by George and Julia Maynard, and it's called the Zulu. Kind of a proud bow, sturdy, similar sort of overall length. Maybe it's more like 50. It's got a pretty large bowsprit. It's got it's a gaff rig catcher yawl. No, it's a yawl, I guess. It's a yawl. And short mast. The Pirate probably has mast that's 52 feet. It's got 2 or 3 spreaders. This is traditional, heavy planked, solid cruising boat that is also amazingly balanced, but in a very powerful way. I was on it in 25 knots of beam sea in the Strait of Georgia, and it just rode like it was on rails, heeled maybe 10 or 15 degrees. It came alive in that much wind. It was built for going around the world, serious ocean cruising, and at that moment, it lived up to that expectation, and really it became alive.
Yeah. Where did you sail that boat at?
A friend of mine owned it at the time, and now he's down in Mexico. I think he made it down there. So we were up in the Strait of Georgia, crossing from kind of the Degnan Bay area of Gabriel Island, heading over to Howe Sound.
Okay.
Yeah, on a stormy day, we kind of got excited because that's what that boat really wanted to do.
Yeah. Fun.
The wind died, and we were all disappointed.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you joining me today, Jake, and spending the time telling us about yourself and the center here. It's been fun. Any parting comments for our listeners?
If you haven't been here, please come visit. It's an amazing facility. We have great things going on, and it's more fun when people come and share it with us.
Yeah, cool. And then can you give us your contact information, Jake?
Sure. I'm Jake Beattie. I'm Jake, Jake, at nwmaritime.org. Phone number here is 360-385-3628.
And the website address?
nwmaritime.org for the Northwest Maritime Center. And Wooden Boat Foundation's maritime website is woodenboat.org.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Jake. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again, Jake, for doing the interview with me. And folks, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I found it very fascinating myself, some interesting stories. If you ever get a chance to visit the Northwest Maritime Center in Port Townsend, Washington, don't miss the chance. And by June of this year, they will have completed their little, I think it's called the Pilot House, up on top of in the top story of their building there, where they're going to have a simulator for actually being on a tanker or big ship in Puget Sound, and what that looks like. And people are going to be using it for simulations and training and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's going to be pretty cool. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode. Please call the listener hotline for any questions or comments, 424-261-2360, or email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com, or you can leave a comment on my website. And if you like the show, please go to iTunes and give me a 5-star review there. That would be awesome. So thanks again for listening this week. Next week, we have an interview with Dee and Sarah Meek. talking about their tugboat, the Elmore, which was built in 1890. You're not going to want to miss that, so please tune in again next Thursday. By the end of the day, the episode will be published on the internet. Until next week, keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. Have a great week and Merry Christmas to you and yours.